Imagine standing on London Bridge in 1875. You look east, and as far as your eyes can reach, the river is completely gone. Not frozen, not flooded, just gone, buried under thousands of ships, masts so thick they look like a leafless forest stretching to the horizon. The noise is deafening, the smell is almost unbearable, and on that water, tens of thousands of men are fighting every single day just to keep the world's greatest city alive. This is the Pool of London, and in this video, we're bringing it back to life. Using advanced AI techniques on old engravings and Victorian-era images, we've reconstructed what this place looked and felt like. By the end, you'll understand why this small stretch of the Thames was arguably the most important stretch of water on Earth, and you'll never look at a modern port the same way again. The Pool of London wasn't a lake or a reservoir. It was a specific stretch of the River Thames, roughly 2 miles of tidal river running east from London Bridge towards Limehouse. It's divided into 2 sections. The upper pool, from London Bridge to Cherry Garden Pier in Bermondsey, and the lower pool, running further east from there. The reason this stretch mattered so much came down to one simple engineering fact. London Bridge, a medieval structure of narrow stone arches, was impossible for tall-masted ships to pass through. So every vessel carrying goods from the far corners of the world had to stop right here, in the pool, and unload. There was no alternative. This wasn't a choice. The city's geography had made this 2-mile stretch the gateway to everything. By 1875, Britain is at the absolute peak of its imperial reach. It spans a quarter of the globe. Tea from India, spices from the East Indies, tobacco from Virginia, sugar from the Caribbean, wool from Australia, grain from North America, all of it comes through here. And the numbers are staggering. By 1794, the pool handled around 3,600 ships and over 620,000 tons of goods, and it kept growing. By the mid-Victorian era, the river was so jammed with vessels that contemporaries wrote about being able to walk across the Thames simply by stepping from ship to ship. Writer Daniel Defoe claimed he once counted 2,000 sailing ships in the pool on a single day. The Thames at this point was barely 300 meters wide. The ships don't unload themselves at the dock. Most of them can't even reach the dock. So between ship and shore, there is an entire world of labor operating on the water. The lightermen are the ones who make it all possible. They work flat-bottom barges called lighters, large, boxy, heavy vessels, ferrying cargo between ship and wharf. By the mid-1800s, around 3,500 lighters were working the pool at any one time. It is dangerous, physically brutal work. Men fall overboard. Barges collide in the dark. In winter, the cold alone can kill. Down on the wharves, the dockers, casual laborers known as dock workers, wait every morning at the dock gates, hoping to be hired for the day. There is no guarantee of work. If a foreman doesn't pick you, you go home with nothing. Families go hungry. Men fight each other for position at the front of the crowd. The system was designed entirely around cargo, not people. The Pool of London in 1875 was not a romantic place. The Thames was an open sewer. By this point, the city's sewage system, only recently reformed by Joseph Bazalgette in the 1860s, was still pumping vast quantities of waste into the river downstream. Rotting fish from Billingsgate Market, coal dust from the collier ships, the stench of spices and tar. American novelist Nathaniel Hawthorne in the 1850s called the Thames the backside of the town, bordered with the shabbiest, blackest, ugliest, meanest buildings I ever saw. Alongside all this commerce, crime is rampant. In 1800, an estimated 11,000 criminals were active along the riverside. River pirates, corrupt dock workers, bent warehousemen, stealing cargo worth £500,000 a year. Rum, silk, coffee, tobacco. Anything that comes off a ship can disappear before it even reaches a warehouse. Smuggling was so common that it was practically an industry in itself. When people picture Victorian trade, they often imagine exotic goods, spices, silk, and mahogany. But 2/3 of the vessels in the pool weren't carrying any of that. They were carrying coal. London ran on coal. It heated homes, powered factories, and fueled the gasworks that lit the streets. As the city's population exploded, from around 1 million in 1800 to over 4 million by 1875, demand for coal rose. Fleets of collier brigs sailed down from the northeast coalfields, sometimes 700 ships arriving together after a favourable wind. The river turned black with coal dust. The air around Billingsgate tasted of coal. For the men unloading these colliers, the coal whippers, the work is as hard as anything in Victorian Britain. Teams of men haul coal from the hold in baskets via a pulley system, working in shifts, their skin permanently blackened, their lungs slowly filling. They are paid by the basket, not by the hour, so stopping for any reason costs them money. Injuries are simply part of the job. The enclosed docks, the West India docks and the London docks, had already been built earlier in the century to relieve pressure on the pool and address the theft problem. High walls, locked gates, permanent staff. But even these measures weren't enough to kill off the pool itself. By the 1880s, new technology was slowly changing things. Steam was replacing sail, and iron was replacing wood. Ships were growing larger and needed deeper water than the pool could reliably provide. Tower Bridge, which opened in 1894, was built as a bascule bridge precisely because shipping still required free access to the pool and could not be obstructed by a fixed crossing. The pool survives well into the 20th century. It endures the Blitz. But in the 1960s, the introduction of the shipping container, which required entirely different infrastructure, deeper ports, and large flat cranes, emptied the river almost overnight. By the end of the 1970s, the wharves are silent. The lightermen are gone. The dockers are gone. The smell is gone. What the Pool of London was at its peak is almost impossible to overstate. For centuries, it was the economic engine of the most powerful city on earth. A churning, filthy, dangerous, extraordinary machine built not of steel and circuitry, but of the muscle and sweat of tens of thousands of ordinary men. Men who had no job security, no safety nets, and no guarantee that tomorrow's tide would bring any work to feed their children. Their city demanded everything of them, and they gave it all. If this video gave you something to think about, please like and subscribe. It genuinely helps us keep making them. More journeys back into the streets, rivers, and lives of the past are on the way. We'll see you there.